Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio, where truth equals reality, and truth is often stranger than fiction.
Hello everyone, welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man, and joining me today is Jodi Foster. This isn't the same actress that everybody's familiar with from, I think it's Silence of the Lambs, although they do share a very, very similar name. The Jodi is spelled a little different, and they're different people. But this one here has been on Sci-Fi Channel on Paranormal Witness in their episode The Apartment. So I guess you could say they both acted, and that can make things a little more confusing. But her book she has out is called The Forgotten Burial, and this is a story based on a true event of Jodi's when her and her daughter lived in an apartment. I don't remember where, but she's going to fill us in on these details. When spirits were getting a hold of her, and she thinks she was crying, the spirit was crying out for justice, and it's a very fascinating story. Now, to learn more about Jodi and the book, you can also go to www.hauntedhousejodifoster.blogspot.com, and she's posting information there, and also about events she has coming up as well. Now, if y'all want to listen to me live, for you guys that are listening at YouTube right now, I'd be more than welcome to have you in the chat room. Matter of fact, I'm missing having people in the chat room at www.paranormalpalace.com. Membership to the site is free, and you don't even need it to get into the chat room now. I got a new chat that don't require sign up anymore. But membership is appreciated, and it allows you to post in the forums. And also, you can be listened to at the same time on my newest show, www.talknowradio.com, which is a new variety show that I've just recently opened up that covers everything, not just the paranormal. And there was something I was thinking I was going to mention. Oh, yes, I remember what it was now. Forgive me there, folks. I just had one of those zip pass moments. But the phone number to call in if you have any questions is 832-632-7904. You can also message me at Mr. Paranormal on Skype, and I can still add you into the call through that means. So, without any further ado, Jodi, how are you doing tonight?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks for having me on your show. I appreciate it. Kind of interesting story to tell.
I would say it was a very interesting story to tell. I mean, I never got your book, but me and my wife watched the My Apartment episode on TV, which was very in-depth in itself, and I doubt it covered everything you had in the book, because movies seldom do, much less an hour-long show, but it still covered quite a bit.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, it was, my book has so much more detail and so much more to the story than what they showed on The Apartment. But, yeah, they did a really great job. I was really happy how it came out, how it turned out. In fact, I didn't actually get to see the episode until it aired live for the first time on Paranormal Witness. So I was a little bit anxious about how they were going to portray us, I was like, oh God, I'm going to look like a crazy nutball lady or something. But, I was really happy, it turned out really well. So, but it was actually, although the show turned out really great, it was scarier living in the apartment, I should say, than being on Paranormal Witness. Being on Paranormal Witness was scary, but living in the haunted apartment was even more frightening.
Well, actually, we've had some haunting activity here, we think, like air conditioners just coming on when nobody's around them. We never figured out why it was doing it, but, there was no harm done, so we just kind of ignore it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this was, when I don't know, for those who saw the episode, The Apartment, basically what happened was I moved from Montana down to Chico, California, and I had no previous knowledge about any haunted apartments or anything, even about the story, because this story is actually related to a nationally known criminal and his wife by the name of Cameron and Janice Hooker, and they were well known for capturing and holding, well, for kidnapping and holding a sex slave as a captive for 7 years under their bed in Red Bluff, California. And I knew nothing about this story prior to moving into the apartment at 125 Carmack Road in
Right.
Chico. Yeah, so this is kind of a story that's multi-layered.
Yeah, I noticed that, and you got to it in bits and pieces, as I remember. Was this apartment recommended to you by a friend, or you just happened to stumble upon it the same way most everybody stumbles on their apartments?
Yeah, well, actually, how it played out was when I came from Montana, I was staying with my friend Edie, who was in the apartment episode as well, and she was pregnant, and she had a husband and a son, and so the living quarters were really cramped, and so I was just, I'd only been in Chico for a couple weeks, and I said, well, I need to find myself somewhere to live, and so I ended up riding my bike around Chico, and I just happened, like you said, to stumble across this apartment complex. So I didn't consciously go out looking for, a haunted apartment or anything like that. I just happened to fall into this strange, mysterious circumstance.
Now, did I understand it correctly while I was watching the video with my wife for the documentary, that you actually at one point tried to move out of this apartment to get away from the activity, but it followed you, or they moved you to another unit in the same building?
Yeah, well, how it happened was I moved into an upstairs apartment, number 14. And I had my daughter at the time, Hannah, she was, little, and I was kind of worried that she may fall over the balcony. So I didn't really want an upstairs apartment. So when I first moved into apartment 14, I started having these really bizarre dreams about this couple that I'd never seen before. And they kind of covered that in the episode, The Apartment, but I go into much, much more detail in my book, Forgotten Burial. So I start out in number 14, and then the manager came and said, well, we have another apartment, a downstairs apartment available, number 23. And so although I was having some strange, bizarre nightmares and waking up at 3:37 in the morning, I actually, the haunting eventually escalated in number 23. I only stayed in number 23 for 30 days before I was like, I can't stay here anymore. Everything kind of culminated into this one night of complete bizarre mayhem. And then I went to the manager, and actually I write about this in my book. The manager actually was a part of the story, although in the apartment on Sci-Fi they didn't cover that. The apartment or the show on Sci-Fi didn't go into the details of how the management knew that there was a possible haunted apartment, haunted apartment, and that the manager, her name was Leslie at the time, she was actually aware of the situation. And that night, that everything culminated into this crazy, bizarre, situation where Misty, who's also in the docudrama, it was Misty, me, Hannah, and the manager. The manager actually let us spend the night at her house, which is very unusual to do, after having that haunted experience. Uh-oh, sorry, my dog's barking. Okay. Stop. Anyway, can you grab the dog? I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And, anyway, so, Leslie, the manager, let us spend the night in her apartment, after we all, including Leslie, experienced this bizarre haunted anomaly. I mean, it was nuts. And so I covered the details of that in my book, but they didn't cover that in the sci-fi docudrama.
Okay, they didn't, so it's good to know that, because that would be something somebody would want to look into. Well, I mean, they wanted to get a clearer picture, in other words.
Right. So ultimately, what ended up happening was the manager, Leslie, knew that the apartment complex was haunted. It wasn't just limited to just those particular apartments. There was stuff going on in other apartments. I found this out way later. And I'm actually working on my second book right now that tells those stories, that this wasn't just limited to like a particular apartment. It was the whole apartment complex. And
so it wouldn't have mattered what apartment you was in. You would have had some kind of activity.
Yeah, absolutely. And, come to find out later on through some investigating and some other things that kind of unfolded weirdly enough, I found out that the apartment complex had been haunted by a woman who had been visiting little children for like over 25 years. So it would be mostly little kids who would see this woman in various different apartments. But at the time, when I was writing my first book, I didn't have, when I was finishing up writing Forgotten Burials, when all of this information came to me, and it was so, these were random people that didn't know each other that would come to me and say, oh my gosh, Jodi, I lived in number 36 and this is what happened to me, or I lived in number 54 and this is what happened to me. And so it was really strange to find out that, it just wasn't limited to one apartment. So I didn't want to live there anymore. I told the manager, I was like, get me out of here. So what they said to me, or what Leslie said to me was, Jodi, we'll move you out of the apartment complex. She talked to upper management. We'll move you out of the complex to a different apartment complex that we own in downtown Chico, but we ask that you don't say anything about the apartment complex being haunted.
I remember that in the docudrama.
Yeah. So they, the management asked me to remain quiet about my experience because they didn't want they didn't want to have that, hanging over their heads when they were trying to rent out apartments. I guess some people would think it would be fun, but then they didn't want to have, this bad reputation of, this haunted.
Yeah. We can't blame them for that.
So, part of the deal was they would pay for me to move, but I would have to remain quiet. And for the longest time, I thought to myself, hey, whatever it takes, I don't care. As long as I'm out of that complex, everything will be fine. I thought that when I moved away, that was going to be the end of the story, but it wasn't the end of the story. And so that's where I end up, having more dreams. My daughter's having dreams. My friends are having experiences. It continued for about 7 years, actually.
So they had, the spirits might have attached to you and your daughter and followed you out of the apartment?
Yeah, I think that the spirit of Marie Elizabeth Spannhake, who was the missing teen, but at the time I didn't know that was, what was going on. I believe that she attached herself to both Hannah, my daughter, and I, so that we would help her to solve her murder. To help find the remains, her remains, and to bring some other pertinent information to light that wasn't known, which wasn't covered in the docudrama.
Okay, now in the chat room, Redneck Radio Woman was asking if this kidnapping occurred in 1972.
The kidnapping of Marie Elizabeth Spannhake happened in January 31st, 1976.
76, okay.
Yeah. So, it wasn't just a, random, this couple actually had made a plan. And Janice and Cameron Hooker were both sick and twisted individuals. And what their MO was to capture women and hold them as captive sex slaves. and they had prepared in Red Bluff a dungeon, and basically it was a dungeon of horror where they had, all this S&M torture chamber, really, is what it was. And so they came out in 76 to hunt for women. That was their whole, objective, was to look for, capture, and hold women as sex slaves. So, 1976 is when that began to, that's when the story began. January 31st, 1976. And in my book, Forgotten Burial, unlike the episode The Apartment, there are answers to the number thing, like 3:37 in the morning and the 35.76. And all those things are covered in my book. But they weren't covered in the docudrama.
Right. But there was one thing that was covered in the docudrama. It was very interesting, and I was really trying to figure out how far into the show I wanted to wait to get to it with you, but while we're talking about this now, I guess it's as good a time as any. And that's the fact that at one point, one of your dreams involved seeing the victim getting her throat sliced, not enough to kill her, but enough to silence her, I think it was, if I remember correctly.
Right.
And the interesting thing about this was this vision you had was information that had not been released into the public, and you had no other means to get it other than from the vision.
Correct. Yeah. Actually, I kept seeing this her being tortured, and I actually saw her in a bathroom. It was a yellow bathroom, so I gave super detailed information about this bathroom, what it looked like, what the mirror looked like, because I kept seeing it in a dream. And that apparently was like the smoking gun, because that wasn't information that anyone could have had or been aware of other than the police. So I think that when Meredith Cooper, at the time, she was the investigative reporter, when I went to her, first she thought, well, here's this crazy lady. What the heck is this all about, And so I ended up talking to her, and I said, this is what's going on. This is what I'm seeing. These are the things in my vision. This is what's going on. And so she was able to corroborate that, yes, that was actually real. That really happened, and that wasn't in the public domain.
Okay, so it wasn't just the throat part. It was other details about the bathroom as well.
Right. I had details about the knife that Cameron Hooker used, and the color of the bathroom, and the basement. And I also, I know that the episode didn't cover this, but I actually ended up assisting the California Department of Justice and the Red Bluff Police Department on the case. And I was asked to remain quiet until the middle of 2010 about my involvement with them, because I actually worked pretty closely with them, or assisted them pretty closely about the directions, my dreams, the numbers, what it all meant. And I can tell you this, that it's an open murder case, so they can't give us any of the dirty details. But there was significant meaning to those numbers that I gave.
Okay. Now, my wife would also ask what the answer was to those numbers.
Okay, well, in my book I cover this. The 35.76 was actually the coordinates to where Marie Elizabeth Spannhake's remains were located. But what they didn't tell you in the episode of The Apartment was that there was more to that. I actually saw, because I'd never been to this place before ever. I never Google mapped it. I'd never seen it. I'd never been there. But I kept dreaming of certain numbers, 44.7. And then I would say, well, I think 44.7 is an actual, plot number of, land, like a land number, of acreage. Then I would tell them that, or I told them that 35.76 miles was when you start at the Hooker's home, which was 1140 Oak Street, in Red Bluff, California. So if you started at Red Bluff and you went northeast, because I kept hearing northeast on road A17, but when you Google Maps that, or anybody did that, there was no A17. Nobody could figure out what A17 meant until we found out that it was actually a PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric road marker. And so A17, it all kind of like corroborated the information, like all the numbers and everything came, it all made sense. The pieces of the puzzle came together once you put, 1140 Oak Street, 35.76 miles northeast on Highway 44, A17. I mean, it all was where, I have to say alleged remains, I guess, at this point, So there was meaning. The police did tell me that I was extremely helpful, and eventually they're going to actually be able to say that, yes, I was helpful on this case. But at this point, because it's an open murder case, they can't say, well, Jodi told us exactly where to go to find the exact bone that we found, because they're putting together the murder conviction at this point.
So this case is still open?
Yeah, it's an open murder investigation. And so I cover a lot of this in my book, Forgotten Burial. So a lot of people have questions that are kind of like left unanswered, but there's a lot of answers in my book.
Right, which I'm sure a lot of the questions my wife was writing down that night was probably stuff that was left out of the, docudrama, which naturally made her curious.
Yes, absolutely. And I've had so many people curious about all of those details, because when the episode aired, a lot of people were just left hanging. And, which I think they did that on purpose.
Yeah, always leave them wanting more.
Yeah. And the ending of the apartment episode, is not the ending that actually happened to me. So I hope that makes sense. The ending to my book is actually different than the ending to the apartment.
Right, which again, too, the show only had 1 hour, had to capture what it felt was the most important part to display, whereas you had more room to display more details. Right,
absolutely. Yeah, so I think that if people get my book, they'll have more answers. And then because I wasn't, and I'm still not able to share certain information regarding the police investigation yet, because I was asked to not talk about certain things, that will come out in my second book.
Okay, and when do you think you're going to have the second book out?
Well, at this point in time, I self-published my book, and so now I have a literary agent who's pitched it to a big publisher, and so apparently, according to publishing, they will buy the rights to the story, then they republish it. So we're talking probably another year and a half before the second book is released.
Okay.
So, but it is coming, and
it's already been written, it's just waiting to go through the ringers?
Yeah. So, but my first book, Forgotten Burial, has many answers that weren't addressed in the apartment.
Now, my wife was just asking what the significance of 337 is.
Well, from what I understand, the 337 actually was the time of the murder. Or the alleged murder. We're still supposed to say alleged at this point because it's a open case. But from my information and from talking to some of the detectives and then also the investigative reporter who had access to information, Meredith, the 337 was the time that they allegedly, killed her and took her out and to bury her in the mountains.
Okay. Now, can you tell us whether or not the police have been able to identify the body you helped them find as being the victims?
Well, I can't tell you that they actually found anything yet, because it's an open murder case. But
Okay.
I know that there's a lot of details to the story, and I'll give you a couple of them that were not covered. Part of the problem that they were having was Marie Elizabeth Spannhake came from a prominent German family from Ohio. And what wasn't known at the time was all 6 of her brothers, well, there were 6 kids in the family, and her brothers and sisters, all of them were adopted. So Marie Elizabeth Spannhake was an adopted child, so when it comes to like DNA and all of, those things, they had to do a lot more digging, because Marie's birth mother, they needed to find someone who was, blood related. And so it kind of, the whole story took on a whole new twist, because no one knew that it was a family secret that they were adopted. None of the children knew. So, that was one thing that the police and the FBI had to investigate, was, locating the birth mother, basically, and then getting DNA from her. So that complicated the case.
Right. Now there was something I had on the tip of my tongue just a second ago, and now I'm trying to get it back, and I don't know where it went, to be honest with you, but, oh yeah, I know what I was going to ask you. Are you still working closely with the police as of today?
I'm in touch with them, yes, but we're not talking like we used to on a weekly basis. We just touch base every so often. The last information that was given to me was that here again, the case is kind of a complicated situation. Cameron Hooker is actually in prison right now for the kidnapping and rape and torture of Colleen Stan. He won't be, he was supposed to come up for parole this year, but for some reason, I think they denied his parole. And so I think that basically, was why they wanted me to remain quiet for a while, because they didn't want, this to get out. But, so he actually, Cameron Hooker isn't coming back up for parole, or nothing will happen to him for the next 10 years, according to a source that I have. And anyway, so they're kind of now slowing down on this case. And I don't know exactly why, but they had mentioned something about 5 years to me, and I can't really get into the details of the 5 years.
Right.
But there's a 5-year something going on. So, yeah. So
this is going to be in the dark for quite a while longer.
It may remain in the dark for a bit. I know that they have a lot of information, and because the case was really complicated with Colleen Stan, and because there was alleged let's see, how do I put this in a good way? Well, the county of Tehama, where the Colleen Stan case was going to be come up for trial, basically the county was broke, and so they had to try it in a different county. And so there's all this complicated, like, bureaucratic, weird stuff going on, and so they have to sort out all of that before they can do what they're supposed to be doing on the other end. So it's pretty complicated. That's, I guess, the short answer is it's complicated.
Sounds like you're trying to figure out which dog gets the bone first.
Exactly.
So, there's a question in the chat room. What was the contraption they put on her face?
Yeah, that was Cameron Hooker worked at a sawmill, and he was pretty handy with woodworking. And so the woodworking talents that he had turned into he turned those skills into making contraptions for torture and in captivity. And so the face contraption was to silence his victim. And if you go onto, let's see, if you Google Colleen Stan and Cameron Hooker, if you look under this, images, they'll actually show a photo of the actual contraption that they put on, or that he put on his victims' heads to silence them. It wasn't exactly like the one on the apartment. That was just kind of a prop that they used. The other one actually silenced the victim with, it had so much foam and just this weird, like, head box thing. So it was to contain and to keep the women silenced.
No, so I was under the impression that there was only 2 women to date that had been kidnapped, but was there more?
Well, there again, that is something that the police are looking into right now, that there might have been a possibility of another victim. And so that also is something that is on the down low, I guess.
Right.
You know?
I understand.
There are possibilities of other victims, I guess. That's the short answer.
So how long did he have the victim that was contacting you?
I'm sorry, how long what?
I keep forgetting the girl's name that you said was the victim. You repeated it several times. For some reason, her name is not sinking in my brain, but the one that you wrote about in the book, how long did he have her captive?
From what I understand, it was approximately a 3-day ordeal with Marie. Her name's Marie Elizabeth Spannhake, but her nickname was Mar Liz, so that might be easier to remember. But she was a fighter, and she, she was also, she came from, like I said before, a prominent, rich German family from Ohio. So some of the information that I gave to the police was that Mar Liz was a fighter and that she was fighting for her life. And so what ended up happening is because she was a fighter, she ended up losing her life because she fought against this man. The other women they were more submissive and, ended up becoming sexual slaves, whereas Marliz was a fighter. And I believe that her fighting spirit continues on, and I know that the reason that she was trying to contact me, I know now why. It wasn't simply just to find the remains of Marie Liz Spannhake. There was a bigger picture. There was a bigger story to be told, and I covered that in my book. I tell you what the significance of this is. It involves so much more than a haunting and a murder. It involves, I don't want to give all the details away, but it basically involves, Cameron Hooker's wife, Janice. And what happened after Janice was granted immunity from the Colleen Stan case. So I cover all those details in my book, Forgotten Bear.
You're making my mouth water for your book.
So there's and like I said, the apartment was an excellent, show as far as being, it covered the details of living in a haunted house and the scariness of it, and, all about the haunting, but it doesn't cover why and what happened afterwards. Like why Marie Liz Spannhake was haunting the apartment, why she was trying to get somebody's attention. And so it's kind of shocking when you read my book, because most people are like, oh my God. I mean, they thought the ending of, the apartment was shocking. When you read the ending of my book, it's even more shocking. So it's, it's a little bit, it's even scarier, actually.
Well, you stop and think about it. In all actuality, this may end up being I'm stumbling over myself here because I'm multitasking, but it may end up being a movie somewhere down the road, like a full-blown 2-hour movie.
Yeah, to me,
and it might go into more detail in the movie. I mean, there's a new movie coming out called The Conjuring that's based on a story of, a couple in a haunted house, and the Warrens investigating it. It had both good and evil spirit activity in it, what have you. They do these kind of movies, in other words.
Yeah, actually, that was my thought, too, is there's so much more to the story that could be covered in an actual movie that people would be shocked about, because the story, like I said, is really multi-layered. It's not just a simple haunting. It is really, for me, it was a spiritual journey of unfolding, and then to find out that I wasn't the only one experiencing the haunting over the years, and then to find out about the land where Marie Elizabeth Spannhake lived, where the apartment complex was, and what that land was related to, and then why Marliz was haunting me and other people, and it's very multi-layered. So yeah, I can understand, in the apartment, they obviously couldn't cover everything that, was significant to the story. So hopefully there'll be a movie someday.
Well, I wouldn't be a bit surprised. Also, there was another question in the chat room. What was the significance of Ernie and what happened to him?
I always get that question. That's funny. Well, the Ernie doll is very significant to the story, and I don't like to give away all the details of why, because it's covered in my book. I cover why Ernie was haunting me and what significance he has, and the meaning of Ernie. So I don't want to give away too many details, but suffice it to say, it's a very shocking detail as well.
Well, right. If you gave out all the details, nobody would want to read the book.
Right. So, yeah. So hopefully,
Forgotten Burial, the radio version.
Yeah. Well, for more details, definitely get the book, because they cover so much more in it. And then in the second book as well, you'll understand the significance to the land, what also happened to Edie, who was in the apartment complex. My friend Edie, there's a twist that they didn't cover in the apartment to her story as well. And so that is covered in my second book. Why Edie, ended up having a big part in the story as well. So, yeah, I'll give you a little bit of a detail. Edie, my good friend Edie, who convinced me to move to Chico, after I moved away from the apartment complex, I moved to apartment down in on Salem Street in Chico, California, and Edie continued to live with her husband in the house, her original house. Well, Edie and her husband ended up splitting up a few years later, even though I'm still being haunted. I think this is about the year 2007 or 2008. And Edie's husband, apparently decided to take it upon himself, because they were splitting up, to go out and rent Edie an apartment. And so he actually doesn't know anything. I don't even know what he was thinking at the time, but I cover this in my second book. Is like, why on earth this man goes out and actually rents her an apartment in that same haunted apartment complex?
Right.
And I was like, are you kidding me? and I thought to myself, what is he trying to kill you? Is he trying to, what would he do that for, But he, of course, didn't believe us that the apartment complex was haunted because he was a cynic, And this apartment complex, I don't mean to say it's like, by any means like a horrible place to live or a really cheap place to live, but it is one of the places that, let's just say, a single mom or a single person can afford. And so I could see why, she or he went out and rented a rented apartment.
Kathy, we had a caller call in. Her name is, did I just call you Kathy? I meant to call you Jodi.
I'm Jodi.
Yeah, Kathy called in. She's recently coming into the chat room. She is having trouble getting the player to work, so she called in to listen. And after I answered her call while you were talking, I heard noise in the background. So, Kathy, if you're listening, if you got a TV in the background, if you can turn that down, it's picking up on the show. And also, I was going to mention Kathy to you in a minute anyway, Jodi, because she is one of the radio show hosts over at Blog Talk Radio. I met her over 5 years ago when I was a host over there myself. And I was going to suggest that you two get together, that she'd like to probably talk to you about this on her show.
Oh, yeah, sure, of course. Sounds good. Yeah, the more the merrier. The story's really interesting. So I think, it's interesting for, many people. Like I said, it's multi-layered.
I'm not sure, but I think I lost Kathy. I only see one, no I don't, I just didn't have it open right. I was going to try to put her on, hold if it has one, but I don't see it. Okay. I thought maybe it was on hold. We could, she could, hear without it doing the background noise, in other words. But let's go ahead and continue on with our show. Perhaps she'll get that under control here in just a second. And getting back to this, my wife was asking in the chat room, do you still have Ernie?
You know what? I can't tell you that. That's a secret. Let's just say, I'll tell you this. Ernie is in a safe place. And I will give you a little bit of a hint. I don't know if you guys saw the story of the Dybbuk box at all. Which was actually, I think it was the show right before my show aired on Paranormal Witness, and it was about, this haunted wine box, and they actually had to, destroy it in a certain way or hide it in a certain way. So with the Ernie, there is a significant, there was something we did with Ernie, yes. I don't have him in my house anymore. He scared me too much.
Okay.
Yeah, he was too creepy. I mean, that whole, he would wake us up in the middle of the night screaming, I feel great! I feel great! I feel great! And I would just jump out of my skin. And, at first I questioned my own reality. I questioned whether or not the thing needed a battery. And I talk about this in my story, Forgotten Burial, is I actually went out and purchased another doll. And so I talk about another Ernie doll and what happened with that Ernie doll. So there were actually 2 Ernie dolls. And one of them we actually gave away as a gift to somebody. I feel really bad about that. But yeah.
Well, I know it sounds like you really had an exciting time, but one of the things that you mentioned was that this was a spiritual journey for you. Other than dealing with spirits one-on-one, what other type of a journey was it? I mean, did you get involved in mysticism or alchemy or anything like that?
Well, what ended up happening, and I feel like I'm saying like too much about my book, but I cover my spiritual journey in the book. I started out being a Christian, and just your typical, like, you know, Christian who doesn't believe in anything other than God, and anything of a spiritual nature is considered taboo, and from the devil. But my spiritual journey is about me, understanding that God is way bigger than me. The spiritual realm is way bigger than me. And then I sort of embrace, my great grandmother and my grandfather on my father's side were both full-blooded Cherokee Native American Indians, and lived over in Oklahoma. But I eventually start embracing the fact that there are other ways of thinking and being in the world, and there's more to spirituality. I still consider myself a Christian. I still definitely believe in God. I definitely believe in a higher power, but I also believe that there's a spiritual realm, and that actually God is a huge, big part of that. And I try not to limit God or these experiences. And what I end up basically saying is sometimes things are just a matter of perception. And so that's the title of my new book, is It's a Matter of Perception.
So not everything's quite as black and white as it's taught in the church?
Absolutely not. Yeah, so not everything is black and white, and sometimes it's simply a matter of perception. At the time, I thought my experience was horrible, scary, frightening, living in a hell, basically. But then I realized, as time passed on, and as I started to actually read the Bible, pray, and then embrace other people's ideas of spirituality, you know, kind of like adapt them to kind of fit into how I felt, I realized that this was, you know, that I'm not going to contain God, and that sometimes things are just simply a matter of perception. Those things that I experienced that I thought were negative actually turned out for me to be spiritual unfolding, enlightenment, and to kind of help me have a deeper belief in God, actually kind of strengthen my belief in God and an afterlife and things that happen. And then I realized, you know, I cover a couple really significant things in my book, Forgotten Burial, that happened to me as a child. My grandfather on my mom's side was a mortician, and he died. So he died on my 9th birthday. And so I talk about this in my book as well, you know, how my grandfather, the significance of him dying on January 31st, 1976, which was the exact day that Elizabeth Spannhake went missing, January 31st, 1976. And all these things that happened that correlated with numbers, that correlated with experiences. It's like there was a
ton of synchronicity.
A lot of synchronicity, and, you know, it made me believe that there's some sort of like, I know this might sound a little kooky, but I don't mean it to be kooky. There's like sacred geometry. There's different things that are significant, that really are relevant and to our life and our existence as we see it right this second, you know. So the spiritual journey is me having these experiences and really greatly deepening my belief in God.
Well, I can see where that could really happen. I can imagine, though, it also led to a interpersonal turmoil between what you've been taught all your life and what you're learning now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and then to find people who would believe in me or believe in my story. And, you know, it's kind of like at first when you start telling people, oh, I lived in a haunted house, they're like, yeah, okay, lady. Whatever you say. You know, and then, no, I did, you know, and then, but the thing about my haunted story, it was like, there was actual proof eventually. And then, there was no way I couldn't even look at it anymore and say to myself, I mean, I tried to live in this denial of my experience for a really long time and just chalk it up to, well, I must be crazy. But, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to ask you, do you think there's a chance that one day the police will be able to come forward after they've finished the case and say her experience was real? She had this information that she told you she had about the bathroom that, we can confirm she had no way to get it. You think they'll ever, come up to the plate and bat for you?
Yeah, I do actually. There's a detective by the name of Detective Randall, who is actually the first person I, started to assist. And recently I've asked him that question. I said, people, I think there's a lot of skeptics and there's a lot of, well, heck, I'm skeptical at times, but, I'm like, can you please, eventually say something that I actually was of some help? Because, I might have this really interesting, great story, but I need it to, be based, in some reality here. Can you confirm to me something? And eventually, Detective Randall said, these are his words, Jodi, soon enough you'll know how helpful you've been, and I will come to Chico and take you out for a beer. So, yes. I think that Detective Randall will step up to the plate and he will eventually come and take me out for beer and say, yes, Jodi was helpful.
Well, good. That's important to have, I think. And, that'll be something to be good to go in your second book if your second book ain't already completed.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm just learning this with publishing and whatnot. There's always room to add more to the story. So, I think they'll let me add more. In fact, when we were talking, they were saying, well, sometimes I guess people want a series of books, 1, 2, and 3. So who knows?
Kind of like Steven Spielberg writes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Stephen King and all those, but I'm like, well, wait a minute, but my story is actually real. This is a non-fiction story. This is not a fiction story. This is, this is an actual experience I had that, is real. And so I think maybe that's what makes it even more strange,
Well, has telling this story caused you any kind of grief?
I believe yes, at first it did. I was very reluctant to share my story or my experience. And I was really afraid of what people were going to think about me. I thought, well, I already had, some anxiety issues. I was a very highly, highly sensitive person. And I was worried that if I shared my story, people were going to say, well, she's crazy. But then I eventually was like, well, you know what? Maybe I am crazy, but there's a whole lot of other crazy people in the world that have had these experiences, and I'm going to find them so that we can talk,
We'll just all be crazy together.
Exactly. And I told my friend Edie, I said, we might as well just get ourselves in on a family loony bin plan, we can just all go together and just lock ourselves up in the mental hospital. But,
most places are haunted too.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I have this really weird story about a friend of mine who actually, and this kind of helped me as well on my journey, is a friend of mine was going to school to become a counselor. And he was a Christian, and he had to run a schizophrenic day group. And he had about 10 men in this schizophrenic group that he was, overseeing. So he tells me one day that, he was really scared because this is his, basically his first time with these people. And, here he is trying to get his counselor's degree or whatever. And so he says a prayer. Dear God, please send a guardian angel to stand behind my back and watch me as I'm running this group, as I'm the leader of the group, please send an angel to stand behind me. So apparently in this group, of schizophrenic people, they're talking, doing whatnot, and one of the clients was staring over his back, staring, and it scared my friend. And then the schizophrenic man out of the blue says, I can't help but staring at you, staring behind you. There's a gigantic angel standing behind you. And I guess that really scared my friend, a Christian friend. And I was thinking to myself, you know what? Maybe there's a fine line between, mental health and
That's pretty interesting you should say that. I mean, I recently had a man on twice named Seth Farber, who's a psychologist, has a book out called The Spiritual Gift of Madness, and he believes that a lot of people diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar might be mystics or shamans that's going through a spiritual awakening. And I just recently had a guy on, and he's going to be back again tomorrow, in fact, that's a patient that was diagnosed with bipolar who says that he was having a mystical experience.
Oh, yeah.
So you mentioning that just brings them two to mind.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a fine line, and that there has to be some, accountability. I mean, obviously, if we're running down the road and we're seeing, someone's naked running down the road with a weapon trying to kill monsters, obviously that person needs to be locked up, and get some help. There could be, something to the fact that, a lot of mental health issues could be chalked up to that. That makes sense to me, that there is a spiritual realm, and that maybe people who are highly sensitive in that kind of a way, are, schizophrenics, or people I have anxiety attacks. And I realized over the years that I was just really sensitive, for instance, to people's energy and fluorescent lights and different things. So I have to take care of myself to not get overwhelmed with those experiences. And I believe that's also why I was sensitive to the spiritual realm, and why Elizabeth Spannhake was trying to get in contact with me, because I was a sensitive person, and I listened to her cries. I listened to her story. And now I also think that little kids are way more sensitive than us grown-ups, and so I think that's why a lot of the hauntings that happened over at that complex were, or she would show herself to little kids because they were more receptive than, grown-ups who are already dialed into thinking that doesn't happen.
Right, and I've heard about that before, and it makes a lot of sense. Now, also, my wife asked a couple of questions in the chat room. She was wanting to know, is it common to have dreams about real-life things that you had no prior knowledge of?
Is it common to have dreams about real life things that you have no previous knowledge of?
Right.
Well, I believe that there are different kinds of dreams. And I'm not a dream expert on any level whatsoever, but I know for me that there are those dreams that are extremely real, that are almost kind of like what your wife's saying. Yes, I have never been there. I don't know why I'm dreaming this, but it's very vivid and very real. And it actually takes on kind of a different feeling than your average dream about, wow, I just had a cupcake and a cup of coffee with this weird random person that I've never met. That's kind of like those dreams that we all have. But when you're having some sort of a spiritual dream, I believe it takes on a completely different, vivid, real, feeling. And, yes, I do.
Kind of like it informs you this isn't just a dream.
Yeah, it's not just a dream. It's kind of almost as though your reality is now that dream. As strange as that may sound, but
doesn't sound strange to me at all.
No, I believe that. Yeah, and in fact, I believe that some Native Americans say that we're actually sleeping right now and that our dream lives are actually reality.
I'm part Cherokee and part Choctaw, but I don't know if my tribe would say that or not. I'm just not familiar with the lore.
Yeah, some people mention that, this is a dream, or this isn't just our only reality. So, but I think you have
science is starting to back that up too in quantum mechanics. The multiverse theory.
Right. Yes, I've read about some of that.
I've had guests on about it. Also, she was asking about your deaf friend and how did she learn to sign?
How did she learn how to sign?
Yeah.
Misty, she actually was born deaf mute, and so she went to school to learn how to sign. I learned sign language through Misty and then another friend that I have that is actually deaf. So I'm not I'm not that great at sign language, but I can communicate. And it's pretty interesting. So I think that for her, Misty, because she was deaf, obviously her experience was through different senses than hearing. The haunting was felt, more like an animal. Like the hair on the back of her neck standing on end, vibration, she would say. Because she couldn't hear. She didn't know, she couldn't hear the Ernie doll, saying, I feel great, I feel great, I feel great. But she saw the Ernie doll move from one location and then to another location and then go, what is going on? And, the incident in the apartment, the docudrama, the apartment with the pink shoes, my daughter's pink shoes, that actually happened. And Hannah was actually there, and we both saw her shoes move on the bed from one position, like at the very end of the bed, to like the middle of the bed. And that, I don't know, at this point in time, I kind of like have understood, like, okay, things like that happen, but it was so scary when it happened.
Yeah, that reminds me of another scene I saw in the docudrama that involved your daughter, and I think it was your keys were missing, and you thought she had taken them, and you had trouble believing that she had not, but you found out later. You want to tell us about some of those things?
Yeah. Well, when I first moved in, I was very organized. I was very particular about things because when I used to live in the mountains, and so when you live in the mountains, you kind of have to be prepared for anything. I lived in the mountains like 3 hours away from any town, so I was always prepared to go or whatever. And so I'd always have my keys, my purse, shoes, coats, like very organized at the doorway, right when we're ready to go out. Well, the keys, I had on a key ring, and I would put them there when I got home from someplace. And for the life of me, I would say, dear God, Hannah, why are you moving the keys? Mommy is very, particular. Keep them there. Stop moving them. And she'd be like, Mommy, I'm not moving them. So I'd get really frustrated at her. I'd yell at her. I'd say, why are the keys in the bathroom? They're supposed to be on the hook in the front living room as we leave the door. And, she'd say, Mom, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. Of course, at first I didn't believe her. I was having these nightmares. She was telling me that there was a lady in our house following me around. She thought she was a friend of mine that would just come to visit every so often. But, obviously, that wasn't the case. It was significant. It was significant because she actually, moved things around. The ghost, Elizabeth Spannhake, moved things around. And I believe now it was just simply to get my attention. But at the time, I didn't understand that.
At the time, you thought you was being scared.
I was. I thought that somebody was in my. I actually thought that there might have been a stalker in the apartment complex. So my dream started out I was thinking there's actually a real person stalking the apartment complex. So somehow I was like vibrating or vibing this situation, even though it happened so many years prior. But I was still getting that energy, that stalking energy, that looking predatory, nature, whatever. So I'm thinking, maybe someone's coming into my house. Maybe I'm being paranoid. Maybe. But eventually, no, we find out that,
it could be.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, at the time, I really was like, God, I'm really insane. I'm a little nuts. I'm a little OCD. I'm a little.
You're a little psychic.
I need some medication. Exactly.
Because my wife just sat here and said OCD a bit, and then you just said you're OCD.
Oh, that's funny.
Listen, I was going to mention we've been going for about an hour and 5 minutes, and I just thought it'd be nice to ask you if you could use a break.
Yeah, actually that'd be great for a second. And my daughter is actually here, so maybe it'd be kind of fun to ask her some questions.
Okay, well, when we come back from break, we'll try to put her on.
Okay, sounds good.
Then let me get the break time music going here, and I'll turn off the mic.
Okay.
Okay, everybody, we're back now. And like we was saying, we're going to get our daughter on here. And just a quick minute before we do, there was a question in the chat room, and I thought we'd go ahead and ask it.
Uh-huh.
And that was, how did you get the cops to believe you when you called them about the weird happenings?
That is a very good question. Well, my fear was that I was going to call and, like on the episode, The Apartment, I called at one point in time and said to the police that I thought I was being stalked, and they were like, yeah, whatever, lady, you're Ernie Doll in the middle of the room doing what? So my fear was that they weren't going to believe me, but, I write about this in my book at the end of Forgotten Burial is, the way it unfolded was, very bizarre. And actually this is part of the second book is, I was standing out in my front yard and I was raking leaves and I was just thinking and I was, thinking about what I'd gone through. I'd experienced all this weird, living in a haunted house, this paranormal stuff. And then all of a sudden I look up I have an oak tree in my front yard and I was out, it was about this time of the year actually. And I look up into my tree, my oak tree, because I heard this kind of rustling in the bushes. And I looked up and I saw a black crow. And for some reason, I don't know, I can't really put my finger on it, but I had this thought pop into my head and I started to shake and it was like my body was shaking. And then I heard in my head, not a voice outside me, but call the Red Bluff Police Department right now. And I kind of tried to brush it off. I kind of thought, oh God, I'm just having some kind of weird thought. Brush it off, Jodi. Boom. No, I can't. The thought pops back into my head. All of a sudden, this black crow, boom, swoops down like it's going to hit me in the face. And then it was kind of at that moment in time, I knew that was that was a sign of some kind. And so I hear that thing in my head that says, call the Red Bluff Police right now. So I go into my house and I sit at the kitchen table and I'm trying to reason with myself. Should I call? Should I not call? God, they're going to think I'm nuts, There's a lady calling out of the blue trying to tell them that she knows something because she lived in a haunted house, And so I just mustered up the strength I could and I took a deep breath and I dialed the number, thinking to myself, well, this must be a sign from God. And so right then, when I called the Red Bluff Police Department, the dispatcher answers the phone and, I said, hi, my name is Jodi Foster. I have, this is going to sound really crazy, but I'm wondering if I could speak to somebody about a case from 30 plus years ago. I think I might have some information that might be relevant to the missing person case. The lady on the phone sounded really strange. She kind of had this kind of voice what? Huh? And so for a minute there, I thought, God, she's going to hang up on me. But she said, hold on, Jodi. There's someone I want you to talk to. And for me, I was like, okay, well, my heart's beating really fast. I'm thinking, oh God, what am I going to say to this guy or this girl, whomever's answering the phone? And, so all of a sudden I hear a deep voice on the other end of the phone and the deep voice says, Miss Foster? And I said, yeah, this is Lieutenant Sanders. Now at the time, I didn't realize because I'm kind of this naive, mom. Basically, I'm like a mom, I'm not in the, I don't know anything about policemen. I'm a cook, I'm a mom. And so I get Lieutenant Sanders on the phone. And Lieutenant Sanders introduces himself and says, Jodi, can you tell me why you're calling right now? And I say, well, I don't really know, except for I had this really overwhelming need to call you right this second. And all I know is this might sound strange, sir, but I'm believing this is maybe possibly divine intervention. I think I might have some, information regarding the coordinates and the disappearance of Marie Elizabeth Spannhake and where her possible remains are at. And so he basically, I thought he was going to hang up on me. But he says to me, Jodi, in all my years of working, I've never been as freaked out as I am right now. And I said, why? I go, what did I do? Why? You know, I'm like, my heart's pounding. And apparently, right when I called, the Red Bluff police were in the middle of a meeting regarding the old cold case from, like, I don't know, like, at the time, I guess it was 30 some years, you know, and they were considering spending some money on reopening the old case. So apparently I really freaked out the lieutenant. Now, and I didn't realize that you don't know, when you call the police, you're not usually talking to a lieutenant, you know, either. It's like, so I was kind of shocked that I actually was talking to Lieutenant Sanders after I found out I was talking to a lieutenant.
I got the big guys.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. So what I said on the phone apparently sparked some sort of, like, either interest or concern or excitement in the dispatcher who, and this is a small police department. This isn't like, we're not talking like, you know, LAPD or something. We're talking about a little town. So, apparently what I said, you know, threw them for a loop because they didn't know how on earth I could be calling right at that same minute that they were having this meeting. I didn't know how I was calling at that minute either, or what I had to say was even relevant. But, the lieutenant took what I said serious because I had mentioned some things, like I said, that were not in the public domain. And so he said to me, how would a person who doesn't have who isn't either connected to the case or know the people or, you know, whatever, how would you have this information? And I'm like, I don't know, except for I got this information through my dreams. I can't tell you other than that, you know, so I was really honest. I said, if you want to think I'm a crazy lady, hell, I don't know, maybe I am a crazy lady. But, this is the information I have. So he was shocked. He was, you know, interested and shocked at the same time. And so he asked me, if he could have one of his detectives give me a call in the next couple of days. And so, you know, my heart's beating and I'm thinking, oh Lordy, when, you know, is this even real? Is this really happening? They're really going to talk to me? Good God. Okay. So within 2 days, I got a call from, a detective who was put on the case, which that was Detective Randall, who I talked about earlier.
And you two have been working together quite a bit since then.
So over a year at least, I had been in contact with him over the phone and through email. And then, they had me in, 2000, I think it was, oh gosh, I want to get the dates right here. I believe it was 2009, May of 2009. Meet with the California Department of Justice and the Red Bluff Police Department in person. And so they came to Chico and met me at a local coffee shop. And at the time, I didn't realize I was meeting with the California Department of Justice. I had no clue who these people were. I thought I was just meeting with a detective. And they sat me down and apparently they had to do a background check on me to make sure that I wasn't in any way, shape, or form involved in knowing any of the hookers or any of their relatives or anything. They had to do a serious, they had to investigate me, basically. Make sure I wasn't a part of this murder or anything like that before they actually sat down to hear what I had to say.
Okay. Now, real quick, how old is Hannah now?
Hannah is 14, almost 15.
Okay. And before we put her on, do you have any, are you listening to a player on another computer close to your microphone, or could you possibly have more than one microphone on?
No, we just have one.
Okay, now I ask because, laptops have a built-in microphone, and if you're using a headset, then they can both play at once, and you may not know it.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm actually at my desktop computer, and I don't have anything other than you guys on, so, Do you hear some background noise?
I was trying to trace the source of an echo, but I'm having trouble finding it. But while I look for it, why don't you go ahead and put Hannah on, and we'll let her tell a little bit.
Okay. All right. This is Hannah, and she's going to be 15 in just a week here. And I write about Hannah and her significant birth in my book, Forgotten Burial. Hannah is actually a gift from God to me, even though she can be real bratty now as a teenager. But here's Hannah.
Okay. Hi, Hannah.
Hi.
So, Hannah, your mom says you had some stories you can tell us. I understand you've had a few run-ins with this here spirit as well.
Yeah, I did.
You might want to get a little bit closer to the microphone.
Okay. Yeah, tell them, you know, like what you saw when you were little and stuff, what you told me and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I saw her when I was little, and I thought she was just my mom's friend.
Okay, so you thought it was just your mom's friend? You mean the spirit you saw in your dreams?
No, like I saw her before, like in the house, and I thought she was just my mom's friend. And then later on, I had dreams about her.
Yeah, so at first Hannah didn't have dreams. Hannah actually saw a person in our house. She thought it was just a friend of mine. So she actually, yeah, well, this was, well, when I don't know, for those who saw the episode, The Apartment, basically what happened was I moved from Montana down to Chico, California, and I had no previous knowledge about any haunted apartments or anything, even about the story, because this story is actually related to a nationally known criminal and his wife by the name of Cameron and Janice Hooker, and they were well known for capturing and holding, well, for kidnapping and holding a sex slave as a captive for 7 years under their bed in Red Bluff, California. And I knew nothing about this story prior to moving into the apartment at 125 Carmack Road in
Right.
Chico. Yeah, so this is kind of a story that's multi-layered.
Yeah, I noticed that, and you know, you got to it in bits and pieces, as I remember. Was this apartment recommended to you by a friend, or you just happened to stumble upon it the same way most everybody stumbles on their apartments?
Yeah, well, actually, how it played out was when I came from Montana, I was staying with my friend Edie, who was in the apartment episode as well, and she was pregnant, and she had a husband.
Information there, and also about events she has coming up as well. Now, if y'all want to listen to me live, for you guys that are listening at YouTube right now, I'd be more than welcome to have you in the chat room. Matter of fact, I'm missing having people in the chat room at www.paranormalpalace.com. Membership to the site is free, and you know, you don't even need it to get into the chat room now. I got a new chat that don't require sign up anymore. But membership is appreciated, and it allows you to post in the forums. And also, you can be listened to at the same time on my newest show, www.talknowradio.com, which is a new variety show that I've just recently opened up that covers everything, not just the paranormal. And there was something I was thinking I was going to mention. Oh, yes, I remember what it was now. Forgive me there, folks. I just had one of those zip past moments. But the phone number to call in if you have any questions is 832-632-7904. You can also message me at Mr. Paranormal on Skype, and I can still add you into the call through that means. So, without any further ado, Jodi, how are you doing tonight?
I am good. Thanks for having me on your show. I appreciate it. Kind of interesting story to tell. and a son, and so the living quarters were really cramped, and so I was just I'd only been in Chico for a couple weeks, and I said, well, I need to find myself somewhere to live. And so I ended up riding my bike around Chico, and I just happened, like you said, to stumble across this apartment complex. So I didn't consciously go out looking for, a haunted apartment or anything like that. I just happened to fall into this strange, mysterious circumstance.
Now, did I understand it correctly while I was watching the video with my wife for the documentary that you actually at one point tried to move out of this apartment to get away from the activity, but it followed you, or they moved you to another unit in the same building?
Yeah, well, how it happened was I moved into an upstairs apartment, number 14. And I had my daughter at the time, Hannah, she was, little, and I was kind of worried that she may fall over the balcony. So I didn't really want an upstairs apartment. So when I first moved into apartment 14, I started having these really bizarre dreams about this couple that I'd never seen before. And they kind of covered that in the episode, The Apartment. But I go into much, much more detail in my book, Forgotten Burial. So I start out at number 14. And then the manager.
I would say it was a very interesting story to tell. I mean, I never got your book, but me and my wife watched the My Apartment episode on TV, which was very in-depth in itself, and I doubt it covered everything you had in the book, because movies seldom do, much less an hour-long show, but it still covered quite a bit.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, it was, my book has so much more detail and so much more to the story than what they showed on The Apartment. But yeah, they did a really great job. I was really happy, how it came out, how it turned out. In fact, I didn't actually get to see the episode until it aired live for the first time on Paranormal Witness. So I was a little bit anxious about how they were going to portray us, I was like, oh God, I'm going to look like a crazy nutball lady or something. But, I was really happy, it turned out really well. So, but it was actually, although the show turned out really great, it was scarier living in the apartment, I should say, than being on Paranormal Witness. Being on Paranormal Witness was scary, but living in the haunted apartment was even more frightening.
Well, actually, we've had some haunting activity here, we think, like air conditioners just coming on when nobody's around them. We never figured out why it was doing it, but, there was no harm done, so we just kind of ignore it.
Yeah.
Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio, where truth equals reality, and truth is often stranger than fiction.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man, and joining me today is Jodi Foster. This isn't the same actress that everybody's familiar with from, I think it's Silence of the Lambs. Although they do share a very, very similar name, the Jodi is spelled a little different, and they're different people. But this one here has been on Sci-Fi Channel on Paranormal Witness in their episode The Apartment. So I guess you could say they have both acted, and that can make things a little more confusing. But her book she has out is called The Forgotten Burial, and this is a story based on a true event of Jodi's when her and her daughter lived in an apartment. I don't remember where, but she's going to fill us in on these details. When spirits were getting a hold of her, and she thinks she was crying, this spirit was crying out for justice, and it's a very fascinating story. Now, to learn more about Jodi in the book, you can also go to www.hauntedhousejodifoster.blogspot.com, and she's posting